Hi everybody. Today we are going to learn to clean our trumpet with just a few specialized brushes, normal sink, and some dish soap. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing, sorry about this, the first thing is disassembling our horn, right? And you might think, well, I'm just going to take the valves out first because that'll release the compression of all the valve slides. It's okay if you have an environment like this to do that, but a lot of times maybe there's a lot of clutter around. There actually is. I just removed it. And so we want to actually make sure that it's safe and the other valves don't drop out when we're least expecting it. So if you turn your horn a certain way and you have all the valves already taken out, then the third valve could fall out or the first valve. So I like to take them out one at a time by depressing the valve first. That way I know the other ones are safe. So we're going to do that now. Unscrew this. And just put them to the side. And then once you've got them all out, I like to take the tuning slide next. Doesn't really matter what order. We've got some gunk on there. That's nice. And it shouldn't be much grosser than that, though. Then I'm going to take the valves out one at a time, right? First valve. And you want to make sure you keep them in order. If you messed up the order, usually it's marked right there on the front of the valve, but not every horn is like that, and if you put them in the wrong order, then a lot of times the air won't come through, and it certainly won't put it into the ports of the valves the way you want. So the last thing I do is take off the valve bottoms, and I also try to keep those in order. So I just put them right underneath their corresponding valve. There's first valve, second valve, and third valve. And the reason I do that is because I want the horn to play the same exact way that it did when I left it. And in fact, these, I don't know if you can see this on there, but these are actually marked with 3 little dots. That's the third valve, and that's because it really does make a difference. These are slightly different weights, even though they're supposed to be the same. Putting them on a different order will change the way that this whole horn plays, right? So, okay, so now we've got, this is just the raw, basic horn. Can't take any more parts off. I like to keep this screw in just so I don't lose it. If yours is loose, then you want to take it out and put it aside so you don't lose it. But anyway, all right, so now over to the sink. See if I can do this here. All right, there we are. And sometimes people do this with gloves on. I would if we weren't in a crisis for gloves. But here we go. So I think you can kind of see that. And we're just going to turn the water on here. Sorry, it's going to be a little bit loud. And basically, I'll try to make it so you can see the whole sink because we're going to use the whole thing. So I'm just going to get this, the tip of this. This is a snake brush, right? Looks like a big snake. I'm just going to get the one tip wet and put a little bit of dish soap on there. Wet it again just to get some suds going. And then the first thing I'm going to do is, if you want to keep track, it's easy to just think about where the air goes. So I'm just going to go through the lead pipe first, and then I'm just going to continue to follow where the air usually would go, right? So I like to wet it first, see if anything comes out just naturally. No, it looks like we're okay. And then you want to sort of rotate either the brush or the horn, because the brush is often uneven. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a side kind of missing. And already we've got some gross stuff happening. We're just gonna continue to rotate and move it a little bit more into the lead pipe, little by little, until we see it come out the other end there, right? And then we're gonna pull it all back through, right? And then rinse into the lead pipe. This is a little bit hot. Now, I know I've actually been wasting a little bit of water here. We'll do better than that. We'll turn it off in between. So there we go. And looking down there, I don't see any little blips. So that's pretty good. I don't know if I can show this to you. Maybe I can. Yeah, that's pretty good actually. So you can see down the pipe, there's no little extra bits sort of sticking to the sides, and that's good. Okay, so now we're just gonna keep going. I'm gonna flip the horn this way, right? And this is the next tube that it goes into. So I'm just gonna go straight down that tube. And again, oh yeah, there's some stuff in there. So this one we definitely want to rinse out right away. Get that stuff out of the valves. I don't know where it went. Did it not come out? Well, it went somewhere. Right. And then we can try to do that again a little bit. And then I'm also going to get these third valve guys. Just like that. And this one, if you're very careful, you can sort of, I don't know if you see this, but you can actually push this through the tube that connects the two third and second valves, right? And make sure you get to scrub that a little bit. You have to be very careful about the angle, and sometimes you have to assist it with your finger, but that's pretty good. And now we'll rinse all of that out. And there's no really good way to check on whether or not you're successful. Oh, I got a little stuff. Okay, sorry about that. You can do it over and over again until nothing comes out if you want. Then we also need to be concerned about any place that has friction. We want to make sure that's really clean. So you just do it like you're brushing your teeth, sort of back and forth. Make sure you get underneath anywhere along this pipe, right? I want to make sure I get covered in soap and sort of scrub it a little bit. You can even use your hand if you want to. And then we're gonna make sure that that all comes off. You don't want to leave any soap on there because it'll be sticky and attract actually more grime to that spot. So, all right. Now, continuing along, we've got the second valve here. Oh, we've got some gross stuff on there. And you can see my brush is running a little bit low on suds. So if you're very careful, you can sort of swap hands, grab the dish soap again, and there you go. Put a little more water on that. Okay. Just get, and this is a pretty small one. You just want to make sure you're not banging against the valve casing. Like if you hear a tink, 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 you don't want to slightly dent the valve casing on the other side with the tip of the brush. So just a little around. And then I usually go ahead and do the first valve as well. There we go. Inside both of those. And I'll do the outside while I'm here of this, another fitting here. This is a reversed first valve, but yours might be both of these. So whatever, anytime it's that brass color, well, it is literal brass, you want to make sure that that gets brushed, because that's really what you're doing on the inside too, is brushing the part that's going to touch the other one, right? Okay, now here we go. If you have a double sink like mine, then you want to just make sure you're keeping it off the middle. It's real easy to ding your bell. It's nice if you have a nice deep sink, a single deep sink, but sometimes then that's hard to get the Trumpet into. So, all right, so now we've done everything except for this length of tubing here, the bell crook, and we just go straight down the bell for this one. So I'm gonna put a little water, just because sometimes that helps get things loosened up, and just let that get dumped out. And you might have noticed I tipped it up. It didn't come out the bell, it came out the first valve, and that's because it was already down in that low spot there, right? Okay, so you want to push until you feel some resistance. That's it going around the crook, right? Then, eventually it will come out, and you'll be able to see this. I don't know about on the video, but you'll be able to see it come out into the first valve. And again, if you're very careful, you can even get it to go into the second valve in that other little bend. And you want to make sure you get those spots, because they can build up grime over time. All right, and then pull it back out after you've scrubbed a little bit, and finally rinse it. And you want to sort of do this a couple of times just to make sure that you're not leaving soapy water behind. Okay, so now we've done every pipe leading into the valves, but we actually haven't done the valves themselves, and that's by design. If you push all the grime into the valves, it's very easy to get it out of there with a specialized valve brush. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'll put this horn aside for a moment, wet the brush, put a little bit of stuff on there, actually quite a bit, and then wet it again, and we're ready to go. And so we're just going to go into the bottom ones. You can rotate a little bit if you'd like. And you don't want it to be much bigger than the actual valve casing itself. If it's a lot bigger, it's really hard to get in there, and you can actually lose pieces of the brush that can bind up your valves later on or get stuck in the slides. And it's a tough fix at the repair shop, because they're like, well, there's nothing in here. I don't know, you know, they can't find it. I also do the tops, even though we've basically got it at this point. And you just want to kind of, you know, just like you're brushing your teeth again, right? Back and forth. And then we rinse all that out. And here, it's easy to go like once through and then you didn't really get every angle. So I like to go through purposefully at an angle a little bit one way, and then I go back the other way at a different angle. Some people even like to stop up the bottoms of the valves, make it come out the slides. That's fine, no reason not to. Except that maybe, you know, you put gunk that you just cleaned out of there back in there, but it'll come out. At this point, if it's loose, it's gonna come all the way out. So, and then you can also use this valve brush if you want. I don't really shine my horns. I don't care if they're shiny, bright silver, but I don't want them to tarnish any more than they have to. So I'll sometimes use this brush just to make sure there's no grime buildup in the bead of the bell, which is what this little rim is called, the bead. And so you can just sort of brush it a little bit there, and then make sure that gets rinsed off. And you could do that actually the whole horn over if you want. You'll notice on my horns there's usually a lot of tarnish where I don't touch. Some other people, they have more acidic hands, and so it actually eats away where they do touch. And you want to make sure that any of those kinds of places you clean. If it's eating away at your horn and you don't clean it, it's going to continue to eat away at it even when you're not touching it, just with the residue that's left over there, right? Tarnish won't really eat away your horn over time. It just puts this sort of like bluish patina. You can sort of see it down in here, and a lot on this third valve in between these two pipes here. And my bell is a little bit blued, but usually not too bad. All right, so we want to put this over to the side, and we'll come over here later, but I have a little drying area set up. And now we're just going to continue with the rest of the slides. So it doesn't really matter what order you do this in. Let's do them for the sake of just having something. Let's do them in ascending size orders. So second valve is the smallest, and so we'll do that. And these I usually do kind of fast and all at once, and just put them back on the place that they came from, and then I bring them all over together. So here we've got first valve. Just sort of, you want to clean these out, and then also clean places you touch, like the saddle here, and clean the outside of the brass part. Make sure that's really nice and clean. All right. There we go. And if you're not sure if there's still soap in there, you can just run it until it's clear coming out of the other pipe, like that. Here we go with the third valve. And you'll notice this has the longest exposed brass part, and therefore is the easiest to find binding if you don't clean it off. So you really want to get this. Oh, look, there's some good tarnish. Yeah. All right. So we'll get a little in there, and then we'll make sure. A lot of the grime builds up around where it turns, and so you want to really make sure those spots are very clean. And doing a little bit of rotation here. And then any place you touch, well, there's the ring, right? And then the end here, where you might pull off your slide to empty it. If you have a Bach, this will come out into two parts a lot of times, and so you'll need to take those apart as well and clean them just like we're cleaning everything else. Okay. And finally, the tuning slide, and immediately there was some gross stuff already happening in there. This is the first bend in the trumpet, right? If you look at the air pattern, blow into the lead pipe, and this is the first place it bends, so a lot of the grime gets stuck here. And you want to just sort of gently add more and more pressure here until you can push past this first bend. And a lot of times that's as far as you can go. It's stuck here now, and I can't get past that second bend, and that's because of the angle of this chimney for the water key. So I'm just going to make sure that part's pretty clean. All right, and then I'm going to go on the other side and make sure that the part I couldn't get to is clean, then try to push past it. And usually you can get past both of them. Today I'm not having much luck, unfortunately. But that's okay, because I know that I've cleaned here and I know I've cleaned here. And so that's good enough. And I'm going to clean the whole outside. You can see I have a little red rot right there. That's when the copper, oh, I said I would do better than this too. That's where the copper starts to come through, right? And as soon as that happens, you're sort of out of luck because it can't be reversed. So as soon as you start to see red, that's the nickel has been sort of stripped away, and all you're left with is copper and zinc, I guess, which is very, very brittle. And once it gets brittle, right now this isn't in too bad a shape, but this could get worse and worse if I don't keep it clean, and maybe even if I do. And so the idea is to never let it get any red rot, but sometimes it just happens. You want to open the water key here, make sure that it's clear. Sometimes I'll even get in there with a brush, make sure the outside's clean. Any place you have friction or or need to touch. Okay, so now this next part, you actually want to dry at least one of your hands. I use my right hand for this, and just put that over my shoulder. Now we're going to do the valves, okay? And it's actually a better idea to do them first so they have time to dry, but I used to do them last. It's sort of a force of habit, so you can do this in whatever order you want. We're going to dry everything at the end anyway. So first I'm going to start, make sure that I get a little bit of soap on here. Not too much. You almost want to water it down more. Oops, just wet that hand again. And this we have to do all kind of continuously. So here's my valve, right? And I want to cover, I don't want this pad to get wet. That's what I'm avoiding. So I'm going to kind of cover it with my hand. It's okay if it gets in here a little bit. And I'm just going to make sure I get all of that wet. I go through each hole with the valve, with the snake, and then outside on the surface. Same thing, right? Any friction surface, you want to keep that clean. And you can see now I'm just sort of making sure I don't let the water get too close to the pad. Nothing serious. Check the bottom of the valve, make sure that's not gross, and then move on to the next one, right? And if you get really good at reading the hole patterns here, you can make sure you don't spray yourself as well, although you might the first time, and that's okay. So we're just checking the bottom there. If you do have a little grime, you can just sort of knock it off like that and make sure you don't get water. You just don't want to put it upside down because that'll definitely get the pad wet. Sometimes you can even get stuff that grows inside of the valve. I'll show you what I mean in a second. Oh, there's some junk. It's good. It's good to get junk out. That means the horn's going to play better. But let me rinse this off and then I'll show you what I mean. So, make sure I'll dry this one off quickly so that we can look at this. But I've actually had stuff, if you don't clean your horn for a while, or you clean it but you forget to clean certain parts, then it just allows bacteria to continue to grow in whatever spot. And so I had one horn where the bottom of the valve, you see that hole? The bottom of the valve had some green gross junk growing on the bottom there, and I just kind of forgot to look a bunch of weeks in a row. And so I kept not cleaning it, and it kept growing inside the valve. So I had to like take dental tools and start pulling them out and use like a pipe cleaner and the whole thing. Anyway, okay, so there's one last part to clean, and this one is not critical, but a lot of times these can get pretty grimy, the valve caps, the bottom caps. And so we're just going to clean that just in a circle there and put them on over like this. Just to make sure that they're clean, rinsed off. Okay, so now we are going to transfer all this stuff over to the drying area, and you want to do this sort of 2 things at a time. You don't want to be carrying a bunch of stuff. So in fact I'll bring you over along with the tuning slide. Here we go. And up a little bit probably. There we go. Yeah. So, tuning slide, right? Second valve. This was, oh, I did this badly. Okay. Make sure we get all this in here. So these are going to be my valves over here. In fact, I'll move the trumpet first. We'll put the valves right here. And this was second. And well, these are marked, so I don't have to worry about it. Okay. Third valve. This is the first valve spot. And finally, the last two valves. So now we've got our whole trumpet ready to go, right? And we want to make sure we dry absolutely everything. So again, let me see if I can make a little, yeah. So we didn't really dry this when we put it down. And sometimes I will do that. I'll shut off everything and just get it real dry. But as long as you get it dry before you start greasing things, it doesn't really matter. You'll get a little bit of water spots maybe if you take a long time, but there we go. Okay, pretty good. So we're gonna put that down. And then these can be tricky. You just kind of gotta get in there like that. Without, what you don't want is for it to eat some of the towel with the edge of the slide, because then you're putting something in there that can grow bacteria as a little island or a little planetoid, and you want to avoid that, especially porous material like this that can hold moisture for a long time. So a lot of times, like the small slides, you can just kind of push into them and get them. Just make sure you're getting it as dry as possible, and it doesn't have to take a long time. So now once we're done with this, all that's left to do is basically grease the slides and oil the valves and oil the slides. And I'll show you what I mean by that. I usually don't worry about these, but I do want to dry the valves really thoroughly. I even switched to a different part of the towel because any water left on here is going to cause very slight corrosion. And that's true of anything on the whole horn, right? We only want oils and slide grease like lanolin wax. Those don't corrode, at least not as quickly. And in fact, even different valve oils corrode at different rates and work differently. And so all those things matter. The Hetman's that is so popular, lots of people use Hetman's. It's supposed to be extremely low corroding. It's never worked terribly well for me as a lubricant, but it does really preserve your instrument well. And so, and that's just as important, especially for antique horns, which maybe I'll clean one of those next time. But those take some special sort of tools sometimes. So, oh, we've got some junk inside this one. I'll have to clean that later. All right. So now, what are we going to do about greasing? Well, I like to grease everything up all together, and I'm actually going to put a glove on for this because if I use a rubber glove, I used this yesterday to do some greasing, so it's already sort of gross. But if I use a glove, it doesn't use as much of the wax because it doesn't soak into your skin. So I use, this is Schilke brand. It's just lanolin wax, really. You can use almost sort of chapstick type wax if you want. But so we want to avoid the valves. We don't want any of this touching the valves ever. And we're going to just take each one of these and any place on any of the slides. So I usually start with a trumpet actually. And any place on any of the slides, I'm just going to, that's brass, right? I'm just going to put grease all over it with 2 or 3 fingers, right? Get it as thin as I can where it's still coating everything. And it's okay if you touch other parts of the horn. We can wipe it off later. So get a little more wax. Just always go back and then sort of rub it together, right? If you're not using gloves, it's a little less fun to rub your fingers together with wax. It's sort of a bad feeling. So you can just sort of put it on there and then rub it in with 1 finger or something. But okay, that's feeling pretty good. Now I'm going to do all of these slides. And this is all so that I can take this glove off and never bother with the wax again, right? I don't want to have a chance that my sort of waxy hand or fingers here accidentally touches part of the valves, because they'll be slow and maybe not even, maybe stick even until I wash this whole thing again. And even then, it's going to take some serious doing to get that wax off of there. Okay, so I don't know why I always leave the tuning slide for last. So here we go. Got an old live concert on in the background. I don't know if you can hear it, but I thought we'd try for some nice light jazz music. So I figured it needed to be royalty free, so it's a concert that only I have a copy of, as far as I know. So I guess that doesn't technically make it royalty free, but if you can tell me who's on this record, and you're one of them, then I guess I owe you some money. All right, so that was a little bit maybe too much here, but that's okay. All right, now I'm gonna take this off. Hopefully I got everything. And now I use a 5-star valve oil. You can use any kind, but like I said, they work differently. They're different functionally, and they're different preserving your instruments. Oh, there's actually a step I forgot, I'm sorry. So we didn't dry everything. We can use this little sort of, looks like a flute cleaning rod, and a little bit of paper. And we want to go down the valves with this, because the inside of the valves still has a little bit of water usually on it. So we're just going to go down each valve. I know you probably can't see this. Go down each valve, pull it back out, down the next one. Come on, come on. Okay. You want to try to get it sort of bound up against itself. So, all right. Yeah, that's better. Okay, now you might say, all right, so now same thing as the beginning, right? If I put the slides in first, then I can just move them back and forth, and I don't have to worry about the valves causing compression, right? I don't have to hold the valves down. But I like to put the valves in first, and I'll tell you why. The way that you move the slides, it's okay at first if you just pull them straight out, in and out, but the way that you actually, you know, the leverage on the slide, because it's uneven like that, right? We're not pulling from here, we're pulling from here. That's gonna change the way that the slide works in. And so for me, I like to put the valves in first. And yeah, then that way I'm working the slides in the way that I would actually play the instrument. And it seems to last a lot longer then. So the way I'm doing this, again, you can't see as well as I hoped. You want to just sort of really load down the whole valve, just the bottom part, obviously, just the silver part. And it's okay if you waste a lot into the table, and then you just move it up and down. You don't really need a lot of rotational alignment, just enough to find the valve guide is fine, right? And then as soon as it's working, I put enough valve oil on there, that's gonna work forever. And we'll do the same thing here, all right? You're really not supposed to touch the tip of this to the valve either, but I can't help it. And there you're just getting you're getting a larger range of motion, so that you're getting the whole tube that is the valve casing oiled back and forth with each other. There we go. And one more, the third slide. Oops, keep doing it off camera because it's not over my other slides. Okay. Now, I should be clear as we're getting close to the end of this. This is not necessarily everybody else's best recommended way to clean your trumpet and grease everything. In fact, almost every manufacturer has a different sort of idea of what is best here. And that's okay. We don't all have to agree on this stuff. But okay, so now I'm going to put the second valve in because it doesn't need to move, right? I mean, it needs to come out, but it doesn't. I'm not going to move it on the fly. And in fact, I'm just going to put all the valves in. Remember, you've got to depress the actual valve in order to get the slide to be able to go in, right? And this is another benefit. When I release the valve, now there's compression holding this in, right? It's trying to pull it back in. If I turn the horn that way, it can't fall out. or at least it shouldn't, unless you have very bad compression on your valves. Oh, this one forgot the screw, so we'll unscrew that just enough to get it on there, and we'll depress the valve, get it all the way in there. Sometimes I'll work it in a little bit before putting any valve oil on. And then I usually leave the tuning slide off just because it restricts motion a little bit. And so now here's what I'm going to do. Let's start with the third valve. I'm going to take it all the way out like this to the stop, right? And I'm just going to take my valve oil and put a dot here and a dot here, right? See that? And that's because that's where the two slides meet on both of them. Again, this is a reverse, so they're on separate parts. And I'm just going to sort of work in that spot until I think it's sort of on the whole slide, around the whole thing. And then I'm just going to go back and forth. And again, until I really get it working, I don't need to do it from here, but I could if I wanted to. So I'm just going to do this for a second until I get enough on there. Now the bottom feels more heavily, is a little bit lighter. So, and you can even angle it a certain way to try to get the valve oil to sort of cut the slide grease a little bit better in a certain spot. Oh wow, now it's moving, right? Yeah, so now I'm gonna wanna start doing it with my actual hand, and you gotta keep adjusting this because you'll knock it out. Yeah, that's starting to get there. Put a little more. You can do it in the middle of the slide as well. And sort of just make sure that it's getting on the whole thing, and then work it in this way. Almost there. It's taken a little bit too much effort. Put a little up here and a little bit at the beginning. Okay. Ah, that's what we want. See, look how fast that is. And it's just fast enough. I think I'm going to leave it there. Sometimes if you go overdo it with cutting the slide grease with the valve oil, it starts to bind again because you've basically removed all of the lanolin wax. And so then you just wipe off any excess stuff you can feel with your hand from the edges of the slides while keeping it closed, of course, because if you open it up, you're going to knock some off of the part you want it on. All right, and now we're going to do the first valve. I'll try to do this one the wrong way so that you can see the whole process. I don't know if you can see this here very well. Not when my hand's there, huh? Okay, well that's not going to work. Let's try this angle. There we go. Yeah, so now this is going to be the same process with one additional sort of bit to it at the end, and I'll show you that. I might have to get a different angle here, right? Just turning the horn so that the valve oil gets where I want it to go. And you can see that immediately worked a lot better, a lot faster, because it's such a much smaller area, right? We didn't have as much to do, and we probably put a little less grease on this one, so there wasn't as much to cut. So now, but the problem with this is it doesn't have a stop rod, right? It can just, let's see if I'll keep these in order here. It can just come right out and then fall on the floor and dent itself. So what I like to do is I take my towel here, okay, and on the brass parts, right, the inside parts, I'm just gonna really aggressively take off, I'm gonna completely dry it off just at the end, right? And I'm gonna do the same thing on this slide as well, right? So that the very endings of the slides are dry. Now you might think that, well, that's not gonna matter. But because we worked it in the way we did, it actually does sort of stick to the part that we worked in first, and it doesn't really want to go to the dry part as much. So now, watch, it sort of stops where I wanted it to. Now, it's not going to completely fix it forever, and the slide already does that because it gets bound off angle, but this just helps it sort of stay there. So I might need to do it a little more, but all right, so now I've got my slides working pretty good. And I put in my tuning slide, right? Make sure it's not, sometimes it's easy to get some grease on the insides of the slides, and it's important to get it out before you go ahead and try to put this together. Okay, there we go. And I like to push it all the way in just to make sure that all of the slide that it can gets that grease on it on the insides of these tubes, right? And then I can pull it back out later to where I want. I often forget when I start practicing again, but you know, what are you gonna do? And then I'm gonna make sure, you could dry these off if you want. These are pretty dry already, just from sitting down this whole time. Oops. Make sure you don't cross thread these. If you just try to jam them on, you just go like, oh, I'm gonna get it. You wanna backwards turn, right? So lefty-loosey until you find it clicks. Oops, no, okay, now we're good. It's because I'm talking about it, having trouble. Okay, that felt like it fell into a, well, oh, there we go. Oh, I was doing it backwards because I got nervous for the camera. All right, and there we go. That's our trumpet all put together. If you want, you can do a little chromatic scale, blow into it like that. But I think that's pretty much all we've got. That's how to clean a trumpet. And I know it's a long video, but it takes about that long. And I'm about to do my C trumpet. So once you've set it up, it'll actually take about half as long to do the next trumpet. And I've got about 7 trumpets to do today, so wish me luck. Thanks for watching.